This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Ruscio review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Well, Kristen, are you ready to keep talking about healthy gut, healthy you? Because I'm excited.
I am. There's just so many good, interesting things to talk about in this book, isn't there?
Yeah, it actually could have been 4 books maybe, but we're going to wrap it up today because we have some other books we want to talk about as well. I had mentioned at the end of our last podcast that I wanted to talk about stress and adrenal fatigue. And there is interest there because looking at the American lifestyle, I think we've identified it's pretty stressful. People are running around, scurrying around. With this last year in particular, with the isolation and the new routines that people have had to adapt to, stress is high.
And there is a definite connection between stress and our gut health.
Apparently, because it sounds like you can have all sorts of symptoms that are unpleasant and would be things like bloating and, just the bacterial overgrowth things, fatigue, insomnia, sugar cravings, depression, caffeine dependence, dizziness when you stand up too quickly, maybe a low libido. No one wants one of those. A weakened immune system, which we've been talking quite a bit about the immune relationship to this. So it turns out that when we're stressed, our microbiota can be disrupted. And we haven't said the words lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, but you will hear those words if you start looking at probiotics, which we've discussed being the live organisms. Those are beneficial organisms, and they've been studied pretty extensively, and we know that they are in healthy guts. If they get minimized, or if the other components of the gut microbiota increase, or the number of bacteria gets so large, we can have what happens to be this adrenal fatigue syndrome. And what I found interesting, if you get this overgrowth that, Kristen, you mentioned,
SIBO.
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You can also have SIFO, which is small intestinal fungal overgrowth, which we don't talk too much about, but he did mention that. This author, Dr. Ruscio, is saying this might be a time you could use antibiotics, that you could prune your gut microbiota by an antibiotic treatment, and when you decrease that overgrowth, you might be able to reestablish the appropriate balances. And I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool. And, he says one way to prune that bacteria is the low-carb or low FODMAP diet, or he also brings up herbal antimicrobials.
Yes, he does.
That's a whole new level for
And he brings
me.
up herbal adaptogens.
Yeah,
and the adaptogens are really fun. And my 360health4u.com does have some products with adaptogens in it. But the adaptogen is really interesting. It can work on both an overgrowth or an undergrowth. It's funny. It works to bring things into balance, to adapt them to the normal, healthy levels.
Right. And these are things found in nature that can work in that way in our bodies when we take them on a regular basis.
Yeah, and have been used in many ancient medical practices like Ayurvedic medicine, I think, and Chinese medicine have used these things extensively for many centuries. Also, with the stress and adrenal fatigue, they reference one of our favorite authors, Dan Buettner of the Blue Zones, talking about stress and lifestyle, that income doesn't relate necessarily to good health. And this idea of overachieving and seeking more and more and more may actually put us in a stress environment that then disrupts our bacteria.
Right.
Or macrobiota.
Right. A wealthy, well-to-do, successful person in America that's so busy can be much less healthy in terms of gut and overall than somebody, in a blue zone area who's living off of a garden and maybe doesn't have a lot of money coming in, living off the land. So yeah, that's interesting that he tied back to the blue zones.
Yeah, we like that when our authors are talking about each other. We feel like they're our personal friends now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talk about is do the probiotic idea and taking them and not taking them. But it turns out that he asks the question, does this mean that probiotics might be able to help reduce or help with stress? And he says, yes. Randomized controlled trials have found probiotics can alleviate depression, anger, hostility, and anxiety while also decreasing the stress hormone levels. In fact, a systematic review with meta-analysis of clinical trials has found probiotics lead to a significant reduction in depression. And that is mind-blowing. And we might even talk about a book on that topic soon. So the idea that your bacteria, if they did an animal study, mice with no bacteria in their guts were more sensitive to stress. So if you don't have the bacteria and you are stressed, you're going to have a more exacerbated reaction to it, which is going to make you not feel good. One more example of relieve your stress. It's a healthy thing to do, and it's going to help your bacteria.
Yeah, I think that the mouse study is really neat. That they were exposed to just 2 hours of social stress and their microbiota shifted, a shift that included a reduction in lactobacilli. The hormones released as part of stress might be a key reason for its negative effects. It has even been shown that stress hormones can fuel the growth of potentially dangerous bacteria.
Yeah, so it hurts the good ones and helps the bad ones. And so another reason not to be stressed. And, you know, when we talk about diet and we talk about fad diets and everybody gets to, that's all they want to talk about. Kristen and I have mentioned obsession with eating can become a pathology as well. And so this author talks about don't make yourself miserable in your attempt to be healthy.
I love that he does that. I really appreciate that. And, you know, he says that you've got to live a life. And if your life is about following your diet like a religion and it's keeping you from
like a bad religion.
Bad religion. Yeah. It's keeping you from being social, from getting outside. He even mentions, you're on the computer all the time looking up your symptoms and trying to figure out what's causing that. Then really you're doing the opposite of what you want to be doing.
You're creating a stress environment.
Yeah.
And that's going to do more damage than what you put in your mouth.
Exactly.
Which what he talks about often. And so he says, as far as for adrenal fatigue, the solution is to fix the source of the stress. And so if obsession with what you're eating is the source of your stress, you need to let it go. Go out in the woods and take a walk.
Well, yeah, he says how nature can be such a stress relief. And what is it called? Nature bathing?
Yeah. Yeah, forest walking
bathing,
So one of the other things we wanted to kind of get excited about was the discussion he had on environmental toxins, which again at 360health4u.com, and my brand partner Shackley, we've been concerned about environmental toxins for the entire length of this company, which is over 65 years, and have advocated for reducing our exposures. And
you have some really great cleaning products that are natural and free of those.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of the antibiotic. When we talk about too hygienic, Shackley has never been one to say we need to be super clean. We do need to be clean. Like you said, washing your hands is appropriate, but maybe you don't have to wash them with pesticides. Or you don't need to brush your teeth with pesticides. And we are doing that. The products that some people buy have chemicals in them that are used for pesticides because they kill organisms. And so they're might hurt your cells too. Well, in his environmental toxin conversation, he does talk about sunshine and vitamin D and getting back to nature. And I am an advocate for all of that. That's part of the healthy lifestyle. Get outside. And Kristen, you were talking about in one of our other podcasts, exposing ourselves to old dirt and the microbes in old dirt. And like when we go into the woods and the forest, that's what we're connecting with. And aside from breathing and air and getting the sunshine. Vitamin sun is very good. And usually when you're outside, you're moving your body. And we know that moving your body is really important too. Now, some people are worried about the sun because of skin cancers. And he does talk a little bit about that. And this was not so much about his discussion on the limiting the toxins, I think has to do with the stress that produces in the microenvironments. When you have toxins in a place they're not supposed to be, they're detected as non-self and shouldn't be here, and we don't know what to do with it, so we have to eat it up and destroy it and get, so the immune system responds to these things at a subclinical level, again, where you're not aware, but over time and more of these exposures could lead to cellular disruptions leading to what we call cancer. And that's our concern, is that these toxic exposures are over time, chronic exposure is what's going to affect poor health.
Right. And when you're trying to avoid toxins and you're trying to reduce stress, getting outside and taking a walk in nature, that's getting to the bottom. That's slowing down and taking a step back from our busy to-do list and just absorbing all the good stuff that nature has to offer. I like that he encourages that, and it makes me miss backpacking. It's been so long since I've hiked and backpacked, and
it'll come again.
It'll come again.
There are seasons.
Yes.
Sun exposure, he says, has been shown to protect against digestive tract disease and, that big word, inflammation, specifically diverticulitis and inflammatory bowel disease. It has also been shown that children getting sun exposure have decreased occurrences of eczema and runny nose. So just that is enough. If you're not worried about cancer, these other things would be nice not to have either. And the relationship of vitamin D, he talks about if you detect low vitamin D, you might detect higher cancer incidence. And we've talked about infections. And this last round with COVID, we saw that there was a relationship with vitamin D levels in people who were getting more severe infections or maybe not surviving. So the vitamin D thing is, I think, really important for us to be paying attention to. And the best way to get it is from the sun, but only during parts of the year, because the sun angles hit the earth and you get a distribution of UVA and UVB rays. And it's the UVB rays that stimulate the skin to start the vitamin D precursors, and which then go to your liver and are converted to the active forms. And that's a natural process. But if you're getting too much vitamin UVB, you can burn your skin, and we know the burns and early burns and excessive burns are where maybe the skin cancers get their start. So we want to be careful with that UVB exposure, but about 20 minutes, I think they're telling us, overall exposure at midday is your best time to boost your own vitamin D production. Now, if you can't do that, I'm suggesting you might need a supplement, and one that can be absorbed, and one that does work, and one that, and if it works, it will raise your blood level of D, and that's the way you can tell if your supplements are helping you. So, vitamin D, sunshine is important. Breathing in the woods, the endorphins outside. There are books written about children who have been deprived of nature experiences and their health being very poor. Actually, there's a great book called Last Child in the Woods.
Yeah, that's a good book.
Yeah. So I recommend getting outside, moving your body, getting your sunshine, and he's telling us that it will have a beneficial impact on our microbiota and our immune system.
There's one more thing in here that I want to touch on before you move on to the next thing. So kind of going back to where he mentions the blue zones and getting outside in the sunshine, he also has a couple mentions about social interactions and how in humans it's been shown that women with healthy relationships experience less stress, hormone release after a stressful event. So we can tolerate stress and have less of that adrenal fatigue symptoms when we have good social relationships, and we saw that in the blue zones, that they all had very strong social constructs.
Yeah, and I think you said you were going to put some of that to work, and you went out with your gal friends and played some golf. Are you taking the golf lessons together now?
Yeah. We try to have some mom dates, and you said you were doing some get-togethers and book clubs in addition to this too, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I like to have tea on my porch because those Okinawans do the 3:30 mugwort vodka thing. I haven't gotten into the mugwort vodka yet, but tea at 3:30, I might work on that. And it is fun to take the social break. And it's funny when you tell people after you've done it that was one of your motivators. Mm-hmm. They laugh, and that laughter we know is a beneficial chemical reaction in our bodies.
Well, and he ties the benefits of the social interactions with oxytocin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
the bonding hormone.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought that was neat to mention.
I think so too. And I think we should, as we read these books, we ought to look at the things that we want to incorporate and not incorporate. And again, the structure of this book, he wraps it up with his great and 8 simple steps to heal your gut and regain your health. Kristen, I've enjoyed this book. You can tell we spent 3 episodes because there's so much good stuff to talk about in here, right?
Exactly. We mentioned that it kind of reads like a textbook. You said you could easily construct a class around it. And us health geeks here, we really enjoyed the front part of it. He tells us so many interesting things that evidence is showing and that he's seen in his practice. But essentially you could, if you wanted to, just kind of skim through those. He has a summary at the end of each chapter. And then if you wanted to really just see how he helps fix your gut problems, you can go back to chapter 23, The Great Innate.
Yeah, and I think he uses enough of the anecdotes, the personal stories through this that it does connect to, it's more readable than an academic paper. He uses personal patient cases and his own story. I will say The Great Innate, simple steps didn't really appear so simple to me. I would recommend... for me, if I was going to do it, I would want a functional medicine provider holding my hand so that I could get a beneficial relationship with that person about what I was tweaking and doing, and getting them to help me understand if I was interpreting my signals properly. Because if you're not used to doing that, I think this is an aggressive plan for somebody on their own.
I agree. And the big chunk of that is step 1 is diving into the diet and experimenting. And at Well Balanced Nutrition, as a dietitian, I can tell you that yes, he says it's the most impactful thing you can do, but it isn't always the easiest thing you can do. And it's helpful to have that support.
Yeah, have a professional with you.
Yeah. And so if you want Well Balanced Nutrition to help support you on something like this, reach out to us or check out our website at wellbalancednutrition.com.
And I will say, if you're a person that suffers with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, gluten insensitivities or intolerances, or diabetes, you might really want to look at this book seriously. And if you're just another person that you don't know what's going on and you have fatigue, brain fog, depression, insomnia, you can't get your weight in the optimum range, you're either too thin or too heavy, if you have gas, bloating, joint pain, food reactions, thyroid, just fatigue again is a thyroid issue. If you have cravings for certain foods, fats or sugars, or if you have hot flashes and you're very moody and people are telling you you're kind of edgy and you don't know what's wrong and you've been to your healthcare providers and they say you're fine and you don't feel like anybody's hearing you, take a dive into this book and see what you think about it. And if you're out there listening to us, we hope you've enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you for listening and hearing all of the interesting things we found in the book Healthy Gut, Healthy You. Hopefully we've shared some information that you enjoyed or inspired you to pick up your own copy of it.
Have a great day, everybody.
and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.